move members and their families to new assignments. It'll affect unit readiness by hindering the service's ability to meet in-strength goals and fully staff operational units with critical personnel prior to deployment. If Congress sustains these reductions, the services will need to submit a reprogramming action to make sure that our military forces are fully supported. Finally, the senator from Georgia assumes $500 million in first-year savings from the Weapons Systems Acquisition Reform Act, and he referred to it in his remarks. I'm very proud to have worked under the leadership of Senator Levin and together coming up with a very important piece of legislation strongly supported by the President and the Secretary of Defense to reform the way we acquire weapon systems. The cost overruns have been outrageous, as we know, throughout the past few years. But there is no one in our wildest imagination that believe in the first year of acquisition reform that we'll save $500 million. I would love to see that happen. I would love to see pigs fly, but we're not going to save $500 million in the first year of a piece of legislation that has really not been implemented and won't be for some period of time. So I am very flattered by Senator Chambliss' reliance on $500 million in savings from the legislation that we recently passed through the Congress and signed by the President of the United States. But in all due respect, it is totally unrealistic. So what we're really doing here is adding $1.75 billion and really not accounting for ways to reduce spending or impose savings in any other way. But look, I also understand and I appreciate the passion, commitment, knowledge, and contributions of Senator Chambliss of Georgia. There is no more valued member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. We simply have an honest disagreement on this issue, and I appreciate the many qualities of the F-22 aircraft and the enormous contribution that it makes to our nation's security, but the fact is we don't need any more of them, and that comes from the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the Air Force, and others involved in these issues for a long period of time. Now, Mr. President, just for a minute, because I know colleagues are waiting, it's my understanding that following the disposition of this amendment, which we hope would happen tomorrow morning, that the majority leader will move to take up a hate crimes bill. And the hate crimes bill is, to say the least, a very controversial piece of legislation and may deserve the debate and discussion of the members of this body. But the fact is, it has nothing to do with the Department of Defense authorization bill. What the Defense Authorizations Bill has a lot to do with is the training, equipping, taking care of re-enlistment and retention and all of the things necessary to defend our nation's national security. We're in two wars. We're in two wars, and we need to pass this legislation, so the majority leader's priority is a hate crimes bill. A hate crimes bill which has nothing to do with the defense authorization. I hope that if the majority leader does that, it'll be the last time he will ever complain about an unrelated amendment being brought up by this side of the aisle. Look, there are important amendments that need to be debated and considered on this legislation. This has got to do with the defense of this nation. So what are we going to do? We're going to tie up the Senate for a number of days. For a number of days, we're going to tie up the United States Senate on a totally unrelated, very controversial, very emotional issue that has nothing to do with defending this nation. So I urge my colleagues on this side of the aisle, I urge the distinguished chairman, I urge the majority leader, let's move forward with addressing the defense needs of this country, save the hate crimes bill for another day, and do what's necessary for the men and women in our military rather than putting an agenda item that has nothing to do with defense next before this body. Mr. President, I predict again that when this bill comes up, if the hate crimes bill is proposed by the majority leader and agreed to by the distinguished chairman, it will lead to a great deal of controversy and unnecessary debate and discussion on a defense bill. If the majority leader, who controls the agenda, wants to bring up hate crimes, I would imagine he would be able to bring it up on his own. Instead, he wants to stick it on to the bill that the men and women who are serving in our military in harm's way today are depending on. It's not right. It's not the right thing to do. I hope that the majority leader and the chairman of the committee will reconsider their position and wait and bring up hate crimes bill as a separate piece of legislation for deliberation, discussion, and vote on this body from this body, and not be tied to the defense authorization bill. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, I rise to speak on another amendment